Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Content 10X Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and this week we are looking at how to create the perfect online customer journey with your content. And we're going to look at how we can make that journey even more effective and even more powerful through repurposing our content. Now, when I talk about the journey, I talk about when people go from being a complete unknown, they don't know who we are, all the way through to being a client and a super fan. And we look at the content that they consume along that journey that causes them to take the next step in the journey. Now, I think that quite often people really underestimate the power of short form content because they aren't thinking about the very start of the customer journey. Now, I really want to emphasize here that I think long form content is really important. And I always encourage you to focus on long form content first and then repurpose it. So, I mean, your podcast episodes, your blog posts, your videos, live streams, whatever your long form content is, I think it's really important to have one solid core content that you focus on. But I think you should never then underestimate your short form content as well, because in a way you have to go back in time. You have to be a bit like Marty McFly and you create that content first, but then you think about how are people going to find you. And the journey that people go on usually starts with mobile first, actually. So small bite-sized content on mobile. And I don't think this is any surprise really. So according to research from Rescue Time, which is one of the many apps for iOS and Android created to monitor phone use, people generally spend an average of 3 hours and 15 minutes on their phone every day. And with the top 20% of smartphone users spending upwards of 4.5 hours a day on their phones, which is kind of really crazy when you think about it. And we have apps on our phones that tell us what our stats are. So on my iPhone with screen time, I'm looking right now at my phone and it's kind of scary, really, to be honest, because it's telling me that my average screen time per day is 2.5 hours. And I didn't actually think I was too bad because I'm so busy running the business and my family and everything. But that's a lot. But we use our phones for so many different things. So we will be there using it for social media. Whenever we have an answer to a question, we'll likely just grab our phones and go on to Google or any search engine. We will listen to podcasts. We might look at apps, all the different kinds of apps, the news apps, the BBC. Maybe we are looking at fitness apps or health, well-being, email, of course, and phoning people, the original use of a phone, of course. But there's so many different ways that we can use our phones. But the fact is we are using our phones an awful lot. So when you think about when people find you, when they first find your content, it's highly likely that it's going to be on their mobile devices and they are likely to find you probably on social media, and it's going to be the bite-sized content that you create on social media that is likely to be the first ever interaction that people have with you and your content. Now, it may not be social media. They may have performed a Google search and you were one of the first results that came back and they landed on your website, or they found your podcast or something like that, but still most likely they are on their mobile device. And if they don't know you already, they're probably more likely to want to dip into your more snackable, bite-sized content before they give you the time to consume your longer form content. So bearing all of this in mind, where I see people sometimes get it wrong is they have a tendency to see long form as being way more important because, it takes more time. It takes a lot more time to create a really long video or podcast episode or an epic blog post than it does to write a tweet. But long form and short form both have their value and they both serve very different purposes because they are about finding people in different points on the customer journey and the audience journey. And the right blend is different for everyone. But whoever you are and whatever your plan, both should complement each other and tie into your wider content strategy. So let's look at this new customer journey in a mobile first world where we get everything on our mobiles first because we spend so much time on them. So let's say that they see a social post with you in. Maybe you were tagged somewhere. Maybe they follow a hashtag that you've used. Maybe you had your post shared with them from someone else. Perhaps they saw you speak at an event, listened to you on a podcast, or saw you on a live and decided to check out your social media. But firstly, that's what they see first. Whichever social media platform you're most prevalent on, they find you there. And then they follow you. So they start to see more of you more consistently, and they continue to see more short form content on their mobile devices. And then they really like what they see and they really like what they hear, and they're starting to grow to know, like, and trust you. So they start consuming your longer content. And then through that, they become that avid podcast listener or the YouTube subscriber, or they love reading your blog, or they regularly tune into your live stream, whatever it may be. And they build even more trust and affinity, and hopefully go on to become a lead, a convert, and buy your product or service with confidence. And it really is important here to refer back to podcast episode 124, where I talked about how you need to spend quality time with your audience, and people need to spend a certain number of hours, some say it's around 7 hours with you, before they are going to take the next step with you. And that's what I'm talking about here, but looking at the start of the journey, which is on their mobile, on social media. Now you need to think about your new customer journey and adapt your content for it, and look at how content repurposing can be the superhero here, because it can help you to plan the journey and make sure that the content that you create is all in alignment, congruency is there, you are saying the same message, and through repurposing your content, you're working really smart as well and leveraging your time and your effort. Because through repurposing our long form content into that shorter content, as I said, you've got that tight alignment between short form and long form. If your short form content reflects the longer form content, then the customer journey is smoother and far easier for them to digest. We're really staying true to our core message, and we're consistent. So people start to really get us. People start to understand us. People understand what you do because you are not approaching things in a scattergun way, but you're being really consistent with that messaging as well. Now, your short form content, that should be interesting, engaging, relevant, mobile friendly. Made that point, really, really, really mobile friendly, because that's where they're likely to find you. Platform specific, you want it to stand out and be clearly tied to that core content. And as you can see, just because it's shorter, this doesn't mean that it's any less important, because if your short form content doesn't stand out, it doesn't interest people and convince them that you're the real deal, and they can start to warm to you and understand who you are and what you are about and how you can help them, then they're most likely never going to make it to your long form content to begin with. So all the hard work that went into that long form content could go to waste if you don't backtrack and work out how are they going to get here. Now, another important point that I want to make is that if they are on their mobile devices and they've looked at your shorter snackable content and they're now moving over to your website, then you need to make sure that your website is mobile responsive and that it looks really good on mobile devices. Don't ever make the mistake of creating that perfect web page and thinking it looks wonderful on desktop and not doing the review of how it looks on tablets and how it looks on mobile. And we've all been there. I can hold my hands up that I've put pages out there and not done the mobile review because I've been too keen to share something, and then I've discovered that it kind of falls apart a bit on mobile, and it needs to look, it's the opposite, it needs to look brilliant on mobile as well as looking good on tablet and good on desktop. So you can't neglect that mobile view of the longer form content too, because like I said, they're likely to be on their mobile devices when they find you. Now, in next week's podcast episode, I'm going to go into this in a bit more detail and look at some real life examples and a very tasty analogy, and you'll see what I mean next week, of this whole concept of the journey that you take people on and the different types of content at every stage of the journey and what you can do to make it as impactful as possible. But for now, just think about whether you are putting as much time and effort as you should be in the desired journey that you want your audience to go on, and making sure that you are putting as much time into the start of the journey, the middle and the end of the journey, because you want people to go the full length of the journey with you. Okay, so thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. I really do appreciate it. Please do hit subscribe and leave a review if you wouldn't mind. I would love that. And also, if you haven't got a copy yet, then please do head over to content10x.com/book and get a copy of my book. It's called Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results. And it's all about how you can repurpose every type of content. It's highly implementable. It's a kind of book that you can read 1 minute and go and implement the next. So please do grab your copy. And if you are interested in our fully end-to-end content repurposing service for bloggers, podcasters, video creators, and also our speaker service, Talk 10X as well, then head to our website, content10x.com, and you'll find everything that you need there. And remember to follow me on social media too. I'm at Content10X on all of the social media platforms. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.